Well, thank you very much for joining us. It would be great if you can give us an introduction, if that's okay, just to tell everyone who you are and why you're joining us.
Yeah, so hi, well, thank you for inviting me today. I'm Surash Surash. I'm a neurosurgeon based up in Newcastle. I've come to talk about my work on equality.
So, thank you very much. It would be great if we could perhaps start off and if you could explain to us what prompted you to personally get involved in striving for equality and driving change within the NHS.
Okay, so I think, to try and set a background to all of this. So, I came to England when I was 2. I grew up on the south coast of England, where I was one of probably a handful of kids from an ethnic minority in my school. But that didn't stop me from working hard and excelling. I became a head boy despite the fact there was only a handful of people from ethnic minorities, and I got to where I needed to be. But equally, my mother, who'd come to this country to become an anaesthetist, ended up giving up anesthesia, tried general practice, found it very difficult, and ended up doing community paediatrics. And it used to always bewilder me that she would come home quite often crying because she was frustrated at how she had been marginalised. She couldn't ever develop herself. And she kept being told that she had communication issues, which, as a teenage boy, I couldn't really quite fathom or understand. But it didn't stop me, it didn't stop my passion, try and work hard and do what I wanted to do, to be a neurosurgeon. So going to medical school, became a junior doctor, and pretty much did accelerate throughout my career, became a consultant at a fairly early age. But it's only when I became a consultant that it suddenly started to dawn on me what was going on around me. And I think I was pretty much oblivious to things throughout my training period. So it'd be the subtle nuances of how junior doctors, in particular the local employed trust doctors, were treated compared to a training grade doctors. And we know that the trust doctors tend to be the international medical graduates or doctors from ethnic minorities. Or as a way that people became consultants, and we could see a disparity with recruitment into consultants. But also when you became a consultant, it was the nuances, it was the subtleties of how you would see a white Caucasian colleague get a tap on the shoulder to say, listen, I think you're one of us, you're one of the boys. We're going to make you into a senior clinical manager. Whereas, women and members from ethnic minorities weren't given that same kind of mentorship or development. And so I've then started to reflect upon my own training. And I do think I was pretty much ignorant to what was going on around me, just because I was I had this toxic ambition to succeed, but I didn't see what was going on around me, recognize it for what it was. So about 3 years ago, there was a article about gender pay gap and the need for it to be reported. And Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at that time, was making an announcement saying that she would also like to do the same with ethnic minorities. So I think I had a few beers. I decided to tweet our chief executive, Dame Jackie Daniel, and our medical director. They both look like fairly sensible, lovely people. So I sent them a tweet saying, wouldn't it be a good idea if we as an organisation could be the first to do that? And with no time at all, I was called to the chief executive's office. I almost felt like a naughty schoolboy. But I have to say, the support I've had from the chief executive and medical director have been absolutely fantastic. Hence why the report was commissioned and the report was subsequently published. I do not hold any position in terms of equality within the country or within my organisation. I'm just a neurosurgeon that's not afraid to speak up and call things out.
Which is fantastic. It's great to hear that you obviously were able to speak out and then actually be able to go on and do something as fantastic as create that report, which I've read, and it is really very interesting and sometimes uncomfortable reading. But I think that's the point of something like that. And just for obviously for our viewers' sake, the report itself was the Surash Pierce report, and it's something that was covered within the CRED report, which is the Commission's report into racial and ethnic disparities in the UK as well, wasn't it? There was a case study included in there. Is it okay if we go through some of the findings from the report? Just the fact you've mentioned it there, it'd be probably quite nice to go on to that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I know, so one of the things within the report, BME staff at Newcastle Hospital reported they were more likely than white staff to be bullied or harassed by the members of staff. They had less opportunity to progress in their careers, and more discrimination for managers. Could you explain a little bit more about that findings in particular?
So, I mean, I never wrote a report like this in my life, and it's always difficult when you're looking at subjective feelings of people. You know, as a medic and as a scientist, I've always tried to see things objectively. So what I started off doing was trying to understand the subjective sense. So at that stage, I went out and spoke to an awful lot of people, and we had a great chair and vice chair at that stage, Odif and Jelly Barney, great people. And I said to them, right, can you, the chair and vice chair of the BAME staff network? So I said to them, right, okay, can you canvass the network and just say to them, you know, can you let us know what you guys have personally experienced? There's no point me as a consultant neurosurgeon saying it, because my experience is very different to people on the ground floor. So see from part of the report, there's that subjective sense, which is the anecdotes of various members of staff from all bands, from all sectors, about how they felt. And I remember there's one particularly good example I always keep quoting, which is of the two doctors. I'm not going to say what specialty they were in, husband and wife team. The wife is a member of the ethnic minority, the husband's Caucasian. And the example given was that whenever the wife walked into a room, she always had to prove herself, to prove that she was good enough to do her job. Whereas the husband would walk into a room and there was this whole air of assumed competence, which is that, he's Caucasian, he's male, he therefore is going to know what he's doing. And, you know, as much as this was in isolation, they're both the same grade, we do see this happen in the NHS all the time, and it's not unique. So we took the subjective, the anecdotal stuff, and then we had to try and marry that up with the national staff survey. So this is a survey that's done on an annual basis, and you can also break things down by your own organisation. So what I needed to see is whether the anecdotal reports mirrored what we're seeing in the staff survey data. And the staff survey data was what did, as you say, made for quite unpleasant reading as well, because it did show that people were concerned about being bullied and harassed. People were concerned about being discriminated by their managers. And people were concerned that their organisation weren't protecting them. Now, that's not just unique for my organisation. That's actually a reflection of the wider NHS, and it's true for the whole of NHS England. And when you look at staff survey data that's just been produced this year, that data's actually got worse. Now, that could be second data, Black Lives Matter. People be more aware, it's difficult to say. So we then had two parts of subjective data, which essentially said that staff were unhappy. But the difficulty with subjective data is that people can walk away from it. It's easy to walk away from what can be perceived as whinging, people's anxieties, because it's really going to be about the objective side, which is, which where my background really is. So we then looked at three specific staff groups, for the medics, nursing staff, and managers. And what we did was we looked at career progression, and in medics we looked at pay awards, to basically ask the question, right, if people on the shop floor are basically saying that they're not being supported, not doing development, well, let's see that. Let's see whether that's actually true. Are people becoming consultants? People become senior managers? Are nursing staff becoming band 6, band 7, and etc. And same with managers. And what we found was actually the objective data just for our trust did support that. So what we did was we married the subjective data, which was difficult in itself to understand. We married that with the objective data, which supported that subjective experience. So what we did was it was a 360-degree analysis to essentially prove that actually there is an issue. Now, I suspect we are on one end of the spectrum there with the Newcastle, because our demographics different to the demographics of London or any other bigger city. But I suspect if you then replicate our data for every organisation within NHS England, you probably see some fairly uncomfortable data.